lovely friends, it's Margaret, and it's time for another episode of Fresh Reads Friday. If you are new to the channel, Fresh Reads Friday is the occasional review series where I talk about books that I have enjoyed recently and I think that you will enjoy too. Today we're going to be talking about Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. Spin the Dawn is about Maya Tamarin. She is the only daughter in a family full of brothers. Unfortunately, there's just a lot of bad stuff that happens to her family. Her mom dies, there's a war, she loses her two oldest brothers, her youngest brother comes back but he has been injured in the war, he is no longer able to walk, and then the Emperor's people show up and are like, hey, we need your father to come and be the Emperor's tailor. Her family shop is only still in business because Maya has been making the things that are requested of her father. She impersonates her brother and goes to the capital to discover that she is in fact actually in a competition with 11 other tailors trying to compete to become the Emperor's main tailor. Getting into what I liked about this, I really loved Maya's relationship with her three brothers. We don't get a lot of it, but we do get to see that she had a different relationship with each of them. It's very real, it's very poignant, and it makes you really sad that some of them are gone. Like, why? Why would you hurt me this way? The other thing that I really liked is that while it did start out as a Mulan retelling, it didn't follow the normal Mulan plot. Like, there was some of that, there was the Project Runway element, and then there's a little bit more, we get into a very mythological, magical part of the retelling. It's very, very, very normal when we're talking in the capital city. There's a little bit of magic here and there, it exists, and then we really get to explore the world with Maya, and I really appreciated that part. I like the fact that this competition was cutthroat. There were some nice people in this competition, but there were also just some not nice people, and there was a lot of conflict. One of the other things that I liked is that magic is not this great solver of all problems. There are consequences. It is not something that you can use without thought. It is something that you actually have to pay a price for. I liked that fact, and I didn't feel it wasn't those things where the price was just ridiculous or it feels not sustainable, but you still had some, there were things to give you pause as to whether or not you were using magic. And I like the fact that Maya was kind of I need to think about this. She doesn't just jump into using it. Also, there were plenty of Mulan callbacks at the beginning of the book, and I really appreciated those as a fan of that movie. As for the things that I didn't like, I felt like there were, overall, I enjoyed the romance, but there were just parts of the romance that I was we could have maybe handled this better in a more introspective, more interesting way. I felt there were places where, maybe things were pushed a little too far, but not far enough that I was but this is trash. Also, the prologue is a bit much. It just didn't really need to be there. The real start to this story is in chapter 1, and I feel if they had cut that prologue at the beginning of the editing, we would have had a much better introduction into this world and into this story. Getting into the more specific things that I like, let's talk about some of the characters. I loved Maya as a character. She was very real, she was believable, and she also was so, she knew what she wanted, she knew what she needed, and she was uncompromising about that. Similarly, her father was fantastic because most people in her father's position would be pushing his daughter to marry, but he still very much has faith in Maya's abilities. I don't feel we see that from parents in this kind of fantasy setting where marriage is kind of the default for girls. I liked the love interest. I thought that he was just this perfect blend of mischief and mystery, but without being creepy about it. His job is to keep an eye on Maya. His job is to be kind of digging his nose in her business just a little bit. But he didn't, he still had boundaries to that, and he still respected the fact that Maya had boundaries. I will say I wanted more of Lady Star Knight. I felt Lady Star Knight was a very strong, interesting character, and I feel she and Maya working together would have been unstoppable. I would have liked to see a lot more of that, but we don't really get to see all that much of Lady Star Knight in this novel. The thing that I really liked about her is that she's a very interesting, complex, strong female character that comes from a very different kind of upbringing than Maya does. She was, I feel I don't remember any of the country names because I listened to this as an audiobook, but I feel she kind of grew up in a different part of the country, and so she has a little bit different expectation. There are different expectations that were put on her as a woman, and so she brings a lot of strength and a lot more of the typical strong woman characteristics, but she's still a very layered character. I appreciated that about her, and I enjoyed it, and I wanted more of that. Going into the plot and the pacing, I really, again, did appreciate the fact that it uses Mulan as a baseline. It uses that idea of a girl dressing up as a boy to save a family member, and then it adds on top of that, that's the bones, and then she adds more story elements to kind of be the muscles and sinew and skin and all of that stuff. Like, it's just the very core of it. It is not a strict Mulan retelling, obviously, because she is not going off to war. That has already happened. Her brothers have already done that. She is fighting a very different kind of battle, and it's not entirely clear in this book how much of that battle you see, because it feels like there's going to be more in the next book. I really did appreciate the quest-like part of this story. She was in this city, so there definitely was room, if she wanted to tell that story, there was room to strictly stay in that competition, but she really just said, no, this is only a part of the story. We're going to make things so much bigger than that, and I really felt like that really balanced. I felt like that added, it took things that you get in the first half, and it ratchets them up a notch. It takes the things that Maya is learning and dealing with and having to work with in the first part of the story, and then it adds this layer of mystical onto them and makes things much more difficult. Like, there's all of this mythology that she is encountering, and I just love mythology made real and characters having to deal with that. Again, I did feel like it was a little choppy at the beginning. I felt like that prologue did not need to be there. I felt like it really it just was one of those things that it's not foreshadowing necessarily. The thing that bugs me about it is that you go in and you're telling the audience how the story ends kind of at the beginning. Like, not explicitly, but you can kind of tell what's going to happen based on that prologue, I felt at least. And I felt like we would have been much better off if we had just started with that first chapter where she is talking about her brothers and her relationship with her brothers. Like, listen, I had 3 brothers once would have been a fantastic opening line. Other than that, I don't feel like there was anything particularly wrong with the pacing. I never really noticed it. It wasn't one that I was like, oh, I'm like turning through the pages, but at the same time, it was also not one that I was like, oh, I'm bored. Like, it just kept me involved and invested, but it didn't have me on the edge of my seat. Going on to the world building, I really like how Elizabeth Lim eases you into the very magical setting of this book. You start out in a very realistic, kind of down-to-earth setting, and so it's not necessarily that magic is a consistent and constant part of people's lives. There are superstitions, there are small ways that magic might be used, especially when we get into the competition. There are small ways that we're seeing magic used, and we're made aware of the fact that it is not necessarily something that can only be used by a few. There are definitely magical items and things, but we don't really, like, magic is something that has to be sought out in this novel, and I really liked the fact that that was the case. I thought she did a really good job of kind of balancing that everyday world with the more mythical elements that we have later on in the book. The magic system is not necessarily complex, but it is very intriguing. This is more of a loose magic system. What is the word? There is an actual term for this, and if you can think of it, put it down in the description box, because you have, like, the very, like there aren't a lot of rules that you sit there and have to learn for this. There are a few that you have to think about and things that, you know, there are consequences, but it's not something that's very rigid, and I like that fact. It's a little bit more fluid, but it didn't feel like it needed a lot of explaining, if that makes any sense. I just was like, oh, okay, this is how things are in this world. This is the thing you can do. You can do these great magical mystical feats if you are prepared and have the right things to do them. I really loved how she worked myth and legend into the storyline. Outside of that, this very much could have been a historically set novel, I felt, and I like that. I like the idea of, like, a fantasy world where things are historical, but they're also a little bit magical, and I like that. I enjoy a little bit of magic in my worlds. So that is my review of Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. If this review helped you at all, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching. If you are new to the channel and like videos about books and writing, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That is it for now, my friends. Happy reading, and I will see you later when we will talk about more wordy, nerdy things. Bye!